Wow, I get tears and chills every time I watch The Anonymous People. And one of the things that stands out to me each time I watch that film is the importance of language. Language is so important. Words are the symbols that we use to make meaning out of our experiences. Words activate and demonstrate implicit biases that we have. A premier researcher, John Kelly, wrote that consistent use of agreed upon terminology will add precise and unambiguous clinical and scientific communication and help reduce stigmatizing and discriminatory public health and social policies. Now, you might have noticed something unique, as I did, about the language used by some of the folks in the Anonymous People. This language comes from a program called Our Stories Have Power, Recovery Community Messaging Training. And while we don't have time to complete the entire training, it is important to have an introduction to recovery-oriented language. Our Stories Have Power was created by one of the premier advocacy organizations, Faces and Voices of Recovery, also known as FAVOR. So now I'd like us to complete an amended version of Our Stories Have Power for this Recovery Zone experience. The goal of recovery community messaging training is for you to be able to identify as a member of the recovery community, for you to learn about language that is recovery enhancing, for you to identify your personal relationship to recovery, to craft a personal recovery message, and to learn how and when to tell your recovery story to others. Now, I've used this phrase recovery community, but what do I mean by this? Well, the recovery community is made up of people in recovery from addictions to alcohol and other drugs, their family members, their friends, and their allies. So, in short, we all make up the recovery community, whether we know it or not, whether we identify with it or not. A premier researcher and advocate, William White, describes the need for recovery advocacy like this. Many of us have carried the message of hope on a one-to-one basis. This new recovery movement calls upon us to carry that message of hope to whole communities and the whole culture. It is time we step forward to shape the history with our stories, our time, and our talents. And you heard in the Anonymous People, by our silence we let others define us. It's time for Faces and Voices of Recovery to tell people what the recovery experience is like, to help people to see who people in recovery are. So this recovery community messaging training stems from a research project that explored the public perception towards people in recovery. 88% of those surveyed from the recovery community believed that it was very important for the American public to see that people get well. Issues of stigma and anonymity have historically prevented individuals in recovery from sharing this with the American public. And addiction and recovery impacts a majority of the general public, whether they know it or not. And persons with substance use disorders are typically viewed more negatively than persons with other mental illnesses. So in your survey at the beginning of Recovery Zone, you were asked, when you hear the word recovery, as in this person is in recovery from an addiction, what does recovery mean? So let's see what others have said. When the public hears the word recovery, the majority of people think of a person as trying to stop using alcohol or other drugs. They do not see that person as being well or abstaining from drug and alcohol use. Therefore, it's important to highlight that a person in recovery is likely not continuing to use alcohol or other drugs, but is rather engaging in a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Sound familiar? You were also asked about discrimination in 3 areas. People in recovery being denied a job or promotion, denied medical, life, or other insurance, and being denied government-backed student loans. So let's see what others said. 80% believe that people in recovery being denied a job or promotion is a problem in the U.S. today. 75% believe that people in recovery being denied medical or life or other insurance is a problem in the US today. And although this is not allowed, given the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Act, this is not being fully enforced. This is a discriminatory practice and requires people in recovery to mobilize and take action. And 52% believe that people in recovery being denied government-backed student loans is a problem in the US today. And yes, this is still a problem, but hopefully this is going to change soon with the passing of the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act that is garnering bipartisan support at the time of this recording. And it's my hope that by the time you're watching this, this barrier to people in recovery getting into higher education is no longer a problem. So why is recovery community messaging important? Now, it's important because research has shown for years that the language we use, such as substance abuser, has a tremendous impact on the way people are treated and the decisions that are made. Also, I believe that everybody knows someone who is in recovery. They just might not know that they know someone in recovery. So why is this? Well, issues such as stigma and internalized stigma, issues such as discrimination and issues with anonymity, these all influence that recovery identity and influence the way in which people talk about their addiction and the way in which people talk about recovery. Recovery community messaging training helps individuals, families, and allies like you to learn that it is okay to talk about recovery, to recognize that we all have shared experiences, and encourage mobilizing to advocate for changes to public policy, to put a face and a voice on recovery, to break down misperceptions that will change attitudes, that will change stigma, to build a strong national recovery movement that's organized at the local, state, and federal levels. Here are some basic messaging strategies. It's important to have effective and credible language that you can use to talk about your life and your experiences. It's important to know how to use messages in different situations. How do I talk about recovery with an employer versus how do I talk about recovery with my family or with my faculty, my advisor? It's important to make it possible for more individuals, families, and the community to get well. It's important to speak with one voice. It's important to make it personal. It's important to know that making it personal adds credibility and it breaks down misperceptions because it's your opinion. It's hard to argue with people's opinion because it's their opinion. It's also important to talk about recovery and not addiction. Your recovery story is important. Your recovery story adds that hope. It transitions from the doom and gloom that the public views addiction as and transforms to this hope of recovery. There are many ways to personalize and develop a recovery message. Messages are not one size fit all, they are very diverse and very personalized. That's what adds credibility. And in fact, these recovery messaging scripts, which we're going to view here in a couple of minutes, have been adapted for multiple populations, such as people who use medication in their recovery, family members who have lost loved ones to addictions, young people in recovery and their families, as well as allies to people in recovery. So it's important that you find your own voice and that you use these scripts, you use these messages as a guide to creating and crafting a solid recovery message that you can and will share with others. So here's an example of what a recovery message for a person in recovery might look like. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a person in long-term recovery, which means that I haven't had to use alcohol or other drugs since July 21st, 2006. Long-term recovery has given me a new hope and a new stability. I've been able to create a better life for myself, my family, and my community. And I'm speaking out about this, sharing it with you so that others have hope. Others can see the hope of recovery. For family members, it might read like this. Hi, my name is Eric, and my family and I are in long-term recovery, which means my son, daughter, husband, wife, whomever, hasn't used alcohol or other drugs in X years. We've become healthier together. We're enjoying family life in our home. Long-term recovery has given me and my family new purpose and hope for the future. I want to make it possible for others to do the same. and for allies, which we all are. So regardless, and I think it's important to take a step back and just say this explicitly. You might be watching this and you might be a person in recovery, but you might not want to disclose that recovery identity yet. And that's totally appropriate. And the Spartan Recovery wants to support you as well. Um, but I encourage everyone, whether you're in recovery or not, to identify yourself as an ally. Because this is the message that we all can share, regardless of our roles or our recovery identity or our recovery status. So it's hi, my name is Eric, and I'm an ally to persons in long-term recovery, which means that I support people who live in recovery from addictions to alcohol and or other drugs. And I support people in recovery by sharing their stories with others, by sharing my stories with others, by telling as many people as I can about how great students in recovery are, by telling people about how big of assets students in recovery are, by telling of the great accomplishments that I see other people in recovery doing. People that I know in recovery are changing the world. They're changing this campus. They're going to graduate school. They're in doctoral programs. They win awards. Stories of people in recovery have impacted me beyond measure. It brings tears to my eyes just thinking about the accomplishments and the influence that students in recovery have had on my life and on the community here at UNC Greensboro. And I'm sharing this with you because I want to make it possible for others to do the same. So as we can see from these examples, there are 4 primary parts of a recovery message. An introduction, providing your connection to recovery, describing what recovery means to you, and explaining why you are sharing this.